website for anybody that that might have missed tonight's webinar. So just be aware that the chat messages sent to everyone, I believe they can see in the recording, but otherwise we won't be sharing the transcript or anything else out of tonight's presentation. I'm just so happy that everybody is here tonight. It's been a while since I have led a webinar. If you've been attending our webinars in the past 3 or 4 years, Kelly Schaefer has run the majority of those. She's out this month, so she has given me permission to take over. So hopefully I do as good a job as Kelly does, because everyone raves about her webinars for sure. Let's see. I'm going to go ahead and get started. I realize that a few more people might log in, and I will just say it one more time at this point. If you haven't downloaded the Merlin Bird ID app, to please do that. And don't forget to actually open the app and install your local bird pack. I made the decision today to really try to make this webinar as interactive as possible. We are going to go online to the eBird website. We're going to use Merlin, and I'm going to show you some cool animations and so forth. And I absolutely welcome questions. I welcome side conversations and anything else. I think webinars are better with increased participation, so I really encourage you to share your ideas and your own experiences. I see several names I recognize in the participant list of folks that have used Merlin and eBird with students before, so absolutely please feel free to share your perspectives. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop my video and go ahead and get this started. All right. So we are not at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology tonight, but both Steph and I work for the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. I'm actually at my house tonight. A number of us are still working remotely or hybrid from the lab, but that is our building. If you ever get a chance to visit it, please do. It's actually the visitor center is undergoing renovation right now, and it'll be reopened to the public hopefully by July of 2024. And it's going to have so much exciting new exhibits and interactives and so forth inside. So I myself am excited to see it, and certainly invite you to put it on your calendar for next summer and come and visit us, especially if it's been a while since you've been there, you've never visited us before. We are affiliated with Cornell University, but we're our own somewhat independent nonprofit located just a bit off campus. And our mission is to interpret and conserve the Earth's biological diversity through research, education, and citizen science focused on birds. And like I said, I've been at the lab for almost 20 years. I love the mission and I love the work that we do. And I know that some of you probably do as well. At the K-12 team, we really get to combine all of those 3 areas: research, education, and citizen science. And this webinar, we're really going to cover a lot of citizen science content. As I mentioned earlier, we are going to hope that this webinar remains very interactive. So I encourage you to use the chat button and set your chat to everyone. They've changed it. It's not just all panelists and attendees, but it's now, at least on my version of Zoom, set that to everyone. And then that way everybody can see your comments. Again, any tech issues, please don't hesitate to use the chat window. And I thought I would get us started with an image. This is a GIF, or an animated image. And so that you don't log off early, I'm going to reveal more details about this GIF in about 15-20 minutes, probably. But I guess I just wanted to start us thinking about the title of this presentation, the local to global, and to reflect on maybe our favorite local birds, maybe a bird that we saw on a special trip. Maybe your favorite bird is one that lives near you, or maybe it's far away. I know my favorite bird always changes from season to season. Kathy's making some guesses. And Christy, yeah. I'll reveal the answer later and we'll get to see this. But you're right. You know that we are at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, so this is about birds. And I think that this GIF kind of beautifully illustrates that birds don't see borders and they move around. And I think they uniquely have a way of connecting ourselves and our students to a global context. I will answer all your questions in a little while, but just maybe find where you live on this map, assuming that you're in North or South America, and see how these species change over time. All right. Moving on, as I mentioned, we're at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology and our mission. I wanted to dig deeper into the K-12 mission. We're really focused on creating resources, everything from free kits, our free lessons and little mini activities and online resources, all the way up through full curriculum kits, which I'll mention later in the presentation. And we also have a mission to deliver trainings like the one that you're at tonight. So we do everything from our monthly webinar series on up to our summer retreat. I believe some of you may have attended that retreat. It's wonderful. It's usually in July. So through those resources and trainings, we try to empower educators to build young people's science skills through three main pillars: nature, citizen science, and inquiry. And I like to think of, I guess where my heart is in the nature connection. I'm an environmental educator at heart, as is Stephanie as well. And you know, we've got a variety of easy ways to connect kids to nature, but we really aim to move kids up into doing more scientific things like doing citizen science projects and completing their own inquiry investigations. And tonight's webinar, we're really going to be focused on that middle pillar, the citizen science pillar. I'm going to assume most of you know citizen science and are a bit familiar with it. If you want to share citizen science projects that you've participated in, maybe to give other folks some ideas about that, feel free. But basically in citizen science, people report their observations using basic scientific protocols. So that's important in the labs project, that we're all doing things sort of using a common terminology, a common protocol, such that that data is utilized by real scientists. So behind the citizen science project is a scientist, or in some cases, many scientists who actually care about that data. And I'm seeing some great projects come up, all of which have like the scientist question behind the data that your students are gathering. And I think especially for middle and high school students, the fact that their data is going to a scientist that really cares is super important. And of course, I'm at the lab of ornithology, so I favor the birding citizen science projects, but there are many, many projects. Stream health, biodiversity monitoring, monarch larvae project, and monarch watch, like the monarch butterfly you see tagged here. I see a number of people mentioning iNaturalist and Journey North. So it's basically crowdsourced science, people everywhere collecting data together. And I will say one thing about the term citizen science. Our team is actually getting together this week on Thursday to discuss that terminology, because the terminology citizen science has become a little bit problematic. Some people are now using, as Summer says, community science, participatory science, crowdsourced science. In fact, the Citizen Science Association recently changed its name to the Association for the Study of Participatory Science. I think that's correct. But I guess I just want to say that now, such that if you have kids in your classrooms or programs that might be troubled by the terminology citizen because they are not citizens or whatever, you could choose different terminology. And what does this crowdsourced science do? In my mind, it helps us put the pieces together of what's going on our planet. I think that's especially important when you're thinking about something like birds, which we all know migrate to different places. And by putting different citizen science projects together, you know, plant projects, insect projects, bird projects, mammal projects, we can get a better idea of what's happening on our planet and how changes in one taxa might be affecting changes in others. Danita is giving us a great list of projects. Bottom line, if there's something you're interested in, like if you're super into fireflies, who isn't? They're so cool. There's a project that you can monitor fireflies with. And again, what I think is empowering to students with citizen science is their observations actually count for something. So it's not just going outside and making a count of something on your schoolyard that stays within your school, but it's sent elsewhere. Technology okay for everybody? Anybody have any problems or questions? Just please add them to the chat. And tonight's focus, because of course in our webinar series, we have a number of projects that are webinars that are focused on citizen science. I really thought tonight we could focus on how we can develop kids' local connection or sense of place, and how we can give them a broader view of the global environment in which citizen science takes place. And I'm going to give you this question, not to answer right now, but hopefully maybe you have a piece of paper, a notebook, something next to you. And I'll ask for you to write down any ideas that you have on this question, why it's important for students to think and act locally or globally, any kind of reflections on that local to global scale. I'm assuming if you attend this webinar that maybe, you know, something about this speaks to you. So toward the end of the webinar, I'll ask for you to share your ideas, and hopefully as we move through the slides, we'll give you some content to potentially reflect on, and maybe some new ideas might pop into your head. All right, everybody got the focus question for the webinar? I will go ahead and move on. Okay. I saw a few people in the chat mentioning Merlin and eBird. And wanted to make it clear that Merlin is massive. Everybody loves it. When I was at NSTA in the fall, everybody came up and so many people came up and said, I love the Merlin app. It's changed my life. It's changed the way I experience the outdoors. I wanted to be clear that right now, Merlin and eBird are two separate projects, two separate apps and assets. Merlin is about bird ID and getting to know the birds near you and helping you to identify them. And eBird is the citizen science project. So yeah, Kathleen says it. Merlin is absolutely magical. So the way that I use it, especially 5, 6, 7 years ago when Merlin came out, was using Merlin to support my use of the eBird citizen science project. Because I really am not an uber birder like many of my colleagues. I know my common backyard birds, but if I see an unusual warbler, I may not know what it is. In comes Merlin. I can figure out what that warbler is so that I can add it to my eBird checklist. I saw a few people mention iNaturalist. I don't know if you know about the Seek app, SEEK, but it's similar. The Seek app is kind of a universal ID app. And then iNaturalist is more the citizen science app. We're actually submitting the data. So much like Merlin and eBird go hand in hand, Seek and iNaturalist go hand in hand. And just to flag any new folks who have joined us, if you haven't yet downloaded the Merlin Bird ID app, I'll ask you to do that now and remind you that you have to actually open the app and install your local bird pack to do the activity that we're going to do in a few minutes. So get that started if you haven't already. I think one of the cool things about eBird is that it is really any bird, anywhere, anytime. And it is, well, actually, it was started right before I joined the lab. I admitted to you that I joined 20 years ago. And the reason why I was hired was because eBird was new and they knew teachers were going to want to use it. And so NSF funded myself and my team to develop our original eBird curriculum, Most Wanted Birds, to help teachers use the eBird project. So eBird's been around for about 23, 24 years, I would say. Back in those days, it was just a North American project. It is now expanded globally. Yes, Ellen, you can record individual Merlin sightings into eBird. They are starting more and more to connect it, and I'm guessing in 5 years, there might be more of almost seamless flow between the two, but right now they're two separate apps, Merlin primarily being the Bird ID app. And why birds? It's not just because I work for the Cornell Lab of Ornithology and I love it, but birds are amazing. If you look at this picture, you can see the amazing diversity of birds. They're global. They're found on every single continent. Many of them travel. They fly, they sing. I think they have a unique way of capturing our imagination and of capturing kids' imagination. So for those reasons, I think birds are just such a great hook into citizen science and into participating in the eBird project. Let's go back to this GIF that I shared right off the bat. I've already given you some hints, and some of you messaged already what this might be about or what you think it might be about. What kind of patterns do you notice? You can look that it's going to start now in January again and run through January, February, and so forth. The colors are in reference to the seasons. It's just another color cue. What's represented here is, I believe, 118 different species of birds. Each dot represents a different species. And the location of the dot is the central point where all the eBird data was submitted from. So, for example, a dot might show up near St. Louis, Missouri, but that bird might range the entire United States or the entire United States into Canada. A dot might show up in Costa Rica, for example, in the winter now. And that bird's range might stretch all the way up into Mexico and into northern South America, for example. But that's kind of the midpoint of the range of that bird throughout the year. And you can see right now we're in summer, we're in June. There are still some birds that are in South America. Those would be the tropical residents. And now moving into winter, you can see that some of these species are still found in the United States in the dead of winter. Those are probably the temperate residents. And then you see a bunch of species making the trip north in the spring, and then they'll go back down in the fall. I just love this animation. I love that it shows, the movement of these species, the fact that they have such diversity of range, the way that they travel. the distance they travel. And I believe on the website, there's another version of this GIF that is numbered so that you can actually match. Yeah, thanks, Steph, for sharing that. Match which dot is represented by which species. Yeah, so local to global, this kind of is one way of illustrating it. Birds don't see borders, and they definitely travel. And what else this brings up for me is the idea that birds are not our birds. You know, they are traveling. Somebody mentioned earlier, like those neotropical migrants, they actually spend more of their time outside of our backyards. For those of us that are in North America, they might spend 7, 8, 9 months in the global south and then come to the global north to breed. This is kind of like their summer vacation, right? It's the place where they build their territories and raise their young, and then they go back home. And so for me, when I was thinking about what to talk about in a presentation about local to global, it really brings for me this idea that conservation has to be global for birds. It has to cover their entire life cycle. And perhaps some of you saw back in 2019, the lab published this scientific paper that was picked up by the New York Times and most other news outlets about the crazy decrease in the number of birds on our planet. Estimate is that we've lost almost 3 billion birds since 1970. So basically in my lifetime, we've lost 3 billion birds from the planet, and they're across many different kinds of species, from our common backyard birds, desert birds, shore birds. Many species are in decline. And it would be really difficult for us to understand the quantity of bird loss or the location of bird loss or what's happening to bird populations, especially because they are, in some cases, such well-traveled species, without crowdsourced science, without the help of citizen science. So for those of you that teach in middle and high school, I think they might appreciate knowing that their data helps us understand bird populations, bird declines, what conservation actions might be helping birds, such that the citizen science data that they submit actually really does help us do the conservation work that we do. And the scope of eBird is immense. I have on here 1 billion observations submitted, which I pulled this number a few months ago. I looked just now because Ellen asked me how many users of Merlin and eBird. It's now, I think, close to 1.5 billion. It's just growing exponentially. And we've got data on about, well, over 10,000 species. Guess what? That's pretty much every species on the planet and from every country in the world. So while this might look like a night sky map, it's actually the locations on our globe where eBird data has been submitted. So remember that an original slide that I had where it helps us put the pieces together. I think this really illustrates it. We have data from every corner of our planet and understanding where birds are and helping us understand how their populations are doing. This is another way of looking at the globe. I actually pulled this straight from eBird today. This is in a particular location, how many species have been observed. Now, you'll notice that the United States has pretty high numbers of species. Part of that is because we have so many birders and because Merlin and eBird have been helping us bird for so long. Like eBird was available for those of us in the United States and Canada a decade prior to it being available in places like Africa and Australia and South America. What do you notice when you see this, like biodiversity hotspots? Maybe you have to teach about biodiversity and hotspots. You'll notice that for one, there's not a lot of yellow on Northern Africa. It's because we don't have enough data from there. But yeah, Kathy, you're right. Like around the tropics, as we've all teach in our classrooms, biodiversity is high in the tropics, and you can see that meted out through the eBird data, the locations where there's over 600 species out of about 10,000 on the planet. Huge biodiversity in Central America, South America, in parts of India and Asia. I'm sure when we get more data from Africa, we'll start seeing more of Africa show up with high species diversity. If you travel, please send us some checklists so that we can better fill in this map. It's one way that we can look at global eBird data. So what is the data that eBird is actually collecting? For those of you that are experts in eBird and users, thank you for your data. But for those of you that are new, eBird is available desktop version or mobile app. And in either case, you really have 3 steps. 1, where were you? 2, what date was it and what effort did you make? Like how long and what kind of count you did? And then 3rd, what species did you see or hear? Common question, can I report species that I only hear but that I don't see? And the answer is absolutely yes. Get if you know the bird songs and can get a positive ID from sound, you are more than welcome to collect that data and enter it as it does not matter if you see or hear the bird. We just ask for as accurate a count as you can for the count type that you did. Similar with the Merlin or the eBird app, although the app is so much easier to use because it tracks your location. It gives you a list based on that location. If you walk, it tracks your path, all of that. But collects the same data. Where, when and how, and what did you see? And then we use that data to make amazing resources available to the public, bar charts, species maps. We collect sounds and videos from folks and pictures. And you can also use eBird to explore hotspots or places you might want to go birding. I'm going to real quick show you some bar charts because I think that they're really cool. When you do a frequency graph, you can choose up to 5 species. I chose some birds that are familiar to me here in New York. And I can see some patterns. You can notice the color code is at the bottom. Blue mourning dove, hot pink is bald eagle, green northern mockingbird, yellow is red-winged blackbird, and purple is yellow warbler. I wish I could have forced it to make the red-winged blackbird red and the yellow warbler yellow, but I didn't. So don't get confused. I've also put their pictures there with their box. Cool patterns here too. So this is in New York. Which birds are migratory? Even if you're not in New York, which birds are migratory in New York of these 5 species? You can go ahead and use the chat window if you like. Sorry about that. Yeah, yellow warbler for sure. Red-winged blackbird. The yellow one, absolutely. You see some, some changes in other ones like the mourning dove, but that could be some detectability issues. But for me, yeah, red-winged blackbird, yellow warbler, migratory. And then we've got some birds that live in New York year-round, bald eagle, northern mockingbird, and mourning dove. Obviously, when you're looking at graphs, especially with students, you want to look at the X and Y axes. You'll see that Y-axis is the frequency report. So in the summer, we're like 60% of people in New York say they see a red-winged blackbird on their checklist. Super common species. Whereas something like the bald eagle, only about 5% of people report a bald eagle on their checklist, and that's pretty much year-round. It's pretty easy actually to make these graphs, and you can go onto eBird, onto the Explore map and kind of get lost in there. All right, I am going to send you on a little adventure. So I'm going to give you about 5 minutes, perhaps a little bit less. So please listen for me to call you back and or set a timer. But I'm going to encourage you to go to eBird, click the Explore tab, and go to Explore a Region. And what that's going to give you is a list of the birds in order of when they were reported. And then you can click on any of those bird names to bring up eBird's species page and learn more about it. So this should only take you a few minutes. Here's the instructions for the challenge. Go to ebird.org, click on that Explore tab. You can choose your local region, or maybe a place that you've never been that you'd like to explore, because hey, this is eBird local to global, so you pick. And just poke around for just a few minutes. I'll call you back in 2 or 3 minutes and maybe invite anybody who comes back early to share where they went and what they discovered. And thank you, Steph, for sharing those links. And I should mention, just in case anybody is confused, you cannot do this in the mobile app. The mobile app is really about data entry. You'd have to be on a desktop or on a browser, for example, on your phone or on an mobile device. And Jane, I see your question. And Stephanie, why don't you write down that question? We could tackle it at the end. Maybe I could even share my screen and go live onto eBird and show how to make that frequency graph. All right, I hate to cut you short because I know whenever I explore eBird, I get lost down the rabbit hole. But why don't you finish looking at what you're looking at? And if anybody would like to share what they found on their adventure, local to global, let us know. And if you didn't get quite as far as you hope to get, encourage you to just bookmark that tab and go back and play with it a little bit later. Pelagic birds in Oregon. Very nice. This is a great time to be looking at eBird because it is fall migration time. You'll notice when you go there, I see what Kathleen said, like what's seen today. When you go to that inter-region, the way that it's naturally sorted is who submitted the last checklist in that region. So when I go to New York, I see who submitted the last checklist in New York, or if I zoom into my county, who submitted the last checklist in my county. It is cool. Like one of the things that I always tell teachers in terms of like, this can be overwhelming when you know there are 10,000 species on the planet. Maybe you're a beginning birder. Um, at a really even rich location, you might see only 600 birds. Many of them are not there when you look at them. Like in my backyard at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology in this local area, you know, there's really only maybe 30, 40 birds that are truly common. Oh, awesome. It's great to see you guys have gone on this little adventure. I'm wondering if some of you are in Australia and Costa Rica, or if you wanted to visit there, and so you took a eBird, little eBird trip. Awesome. Yeah, you can really dig in. Like I said, poke around. There's every time I play with eBird, I find new things to kind of look at, and they're constantly innovative and innovating and changing it, which can be challenging for us as educators. I gave this webinar a year ago. I have to look at eBird because guess what? They may have moved or changed something or made something better. Awesome. I'm so thrilled that some of you found the hotspot version of this. You can see it below that red circle. That is such a great way to find cool birding places near you. Okay. All right. I cannot do any callbacks except to say, please pay attention to the presentation and put eBird aside for the moment. You can always go back to it later. I want to switch gears into Merlin Bird ID. Hopefully it's downloaded for most, if not all of you. Merlin is a bird ID wizard. It is even better nowadays because we have launched the sound ID. One way to use it with students is to identify birds by sight. What size was the bird? What were the main colors? And what was the bird doing? And like magic, Merlin will give you its most common suspects for that area at that time. I want to invite you all, even if you're familiar with eBird, or with Merlin, you may not have discovered this. I love using a Merlin in this way. Open up your Merlin app. I'm going to go ahead and, why not? I'll start my video. That way you can see that I'm participating too. All right. Open up the Merlin app. I'll do it alongside you. Now, when I did this screen capture a couple of months ago, Merlin, the app looked a little bit different. Now, in order to do what I am going to suggest, you have to find the Explore button at the bottom. If you have an older version of Merlin, it may still look like this, but they released an update probably in the last month or two. So go to that Explore button or tab. It could look like the magnifying glass at the bottom. Click on the Explore Birds. And then, at least for my iPhone, up in the upper right corner, there is a slider. I hit that slider, and I'm going to look at my local birds. So I'm going to encourage you to look at your local birds. So location, current location, which is Ithaca, New York, the date, today's date, and then you're going to get sort by. And what I sort by, I don't think you can see that, is most likely. Is everybody following along? So use that slider, your location, today's date, and most likely. I'm going to hit done. And what it's given me is, in order, the most likely birds here in Ithaca, New York. So I would invite any or all of you to share your location and your top 5 birds just for fun. So for me, I'm going to type in Ithaca, and my top birds are blue jay, black-capped chickadee, and American goldfinch. North Carolina, mourning dove, Carolina chickadee, and northern cardinal. So you've got common backyard birds. Massachusetts, starling, blue jay, northern cardinal. Oh, we share in the blue jay with Massachusetts. Lots of chickadees, lots of northern cardinals. Blue jay popular in Virginia. Awesome. Yeah. Oh, welcome from Costa Rica. We've got Vancouver, Canada, so way on the other side, and you've got black-capped chickadees too in your top three. It's so cool. Pennsylvania's got the blue jay, not surprisingly. So here's what's cool. If you, for example, well, there's a lot of cool things. If you hit that slider again, let's say, for example, I'm not going to teach this content to my students today. What I'm going to do is look at a specific date, and I'm not going to teach this content until spring. I'm going to look at March 19th, just for instance. You might say, you know what, I really want to do a bird unit into school year in May or whenever. You can go back, hit done, and now my birds have changed. So in March, I don't see the blue jay, I see the red-winged blackbird as my top bird. So Merlin is pulling in from eBird all the data at that location to figure out right where you are, right on that date, what are your common birds. So when I think of, again, like the local to global connection, you can certainly play with this anywhere on the globe. Oh, we've got Philippines represented today. Welcome. Yeah. So Elena's looking at Venezuela. Like you can visit other parts of the world if you download the entire global list. Now that's going to probably eat up a lot of your memory of your phone, but hopefully you've got a new phone and you can do that. But you can see your common birds. What I love to do with this is if I've got a new group of teachers or students coming to Ithaca who may not be familiar with the bird, I can figure out, oh, they're going to visit in March. Here's the top 10 birds. Those are the birds that I need to teach those folks. So I love to use it, Merlin as a teaching tool in that way. I personally think that giving people an idea of what's around them is important. I love putting names on things, especially with like Merlin and the Seek app. I love going around using the Seek app to identify what looks just like weeds in my yard. Oh my gosh, that's chamomile. That's Queen Anne's lace. That's whatever. It'll give you the name. I love putting names to things, and I think it helps us connect, especially when we see like, oh wow, that yellow warbler that's common in the summertime is not on the list in the wintertime. It's with our friends in Costa Rica. So you can use Merlin, I think, in cool ways to identify your local birds, teach your local birds, and connect to your local birds. All right. Thank you all for doing that with me. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that was something new for at least some of you. Okay, I'm going to show you another really cool eBird resource. When I think of local to global, my mind goes to these awesome animated maps. So this is an abundance map. So you can read what abundance is here on the screen. It's the relative abundance for every week of the year. These are by species. So before we were looking at that GIF with many species, this is one species. In this case, I chose the barn swallow because I know it's super ubiquitous. It's probably found wherever you are, at least part of the year. And you can see it's more abundant is the more purple, but it's found everywhere where it's colored. All right, let's play this. Right now, you can see the week of the year. We're starting in January, and this will cycle through February, March, April, May, June. So it's the barn swallow migratory. Play that one more time for you, starting in January again. Definitely migratory, although it is found in certain locations around the world year round, but I'm not going to see the barn swallow in New York. We've got a lot of friends from Massachusetts today. Not going to see it until, let's see when it shows up. Right around then, around May. Again, this is based on real eBird data. It's also a model. So what they've built into this model is land use data and population density and rainfall and average temperature and all of these other things to help fill in the gaps. Because as I told you earlier, we may not have data through across Africa or enough just raw eBird data, and we don't want this to look like a bunch of points. We want it to look smooth. So this is a model. And yes, you can reach that link anytime. Steph just shared the link. There are over 100 species in there now, variety of taxa, and you can look at these whatever maps you're interested in. So again, when we make that connection with our students, yeah, these local birds, you can see where they're located throughout the world. You can play animations of the data. I just think this is really cool. My mind was blown when these were first released about 10 years ago. When I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is some of the coolest stuff to see eBird data that I submit, that you submit, that our students submit, come alive in this way. I think it's just so cool. And again, without eBird data, this would not be possible. So thank you so much for submitting. And I encourage you to take the plunge if you haven't already and think about how you can submit data with your students or with your family, with community. All right, moving on. Okay, back to the focus question for the webinar. Appreciate that everybody attended tonight. I hope I met your expectations as far as exploring this question of eBird local to global. Why is it important? Why do we care? Why might it benefit the students that we work with to count birds locally, to look at birds in a global perspective? Any ideas? I welcome you to share them in the chat. Mm-hmm. Seen a lot of references to conservation. I agree. Like if you don't understand or know or care about the stuff in your backyard, how are you supposed to care or know about you know, those species in different areas? Eva, great comment about climate. Through citizen science, through looking at these maps, through collecting data, we can understand the impacts of global stressors like climate change and other problems, that habitat degradation in certain areas. Right. I mean, when I think of it, I've got a 12-year-old. She's a 7th grader, so she's probably in the same age as some of you teach. Like I understand that the world she's growing up in is so vastly different than the world that I grew up in, you know, before the internet, before cell phones. She's living in a global society. And like Irene beautifully said, we're all connected, right? Like we've got to give our kids, I think, this notion in many, many different ways and forms that it's not just us in our backyard, in our individual school, in our individual community, but like we are in this matrix of a globe and we're all connected, and birds can do that. And I think there's something poetic and beautiful about that. You know, teaching kids to care. Yep. Yeah. Summer beautifully said, we're all connected. Our actions or inactions impact everyone in one way or the other. Yep. Keith, I'm not sure if this is what you're thinking, the connection to weather and seasons. I found more since I've been involved in eBird, a real deep connection to the seasons, you know, and I see it transforming me in ways like when I see lightning bugs, I I know when lightning bugs come out because I watch, I know when certain plants bloom. I know when I have to go out in my backyard and pull garlic mustard. Like, these are things that I notice because I notice the birds, I notice the seasonality. So I think in a lot of ways, humans have lost that skill that probably many of our ancestors had, or native indigenous folks had, of being super tied to the seasons. I think that birds and doing eBird and counting repeatedly and looking at these maps can give us some clues that are in a lot of ways missing right now for us. Beautifully put. Yeah. Yeah, awesome answer. So encourage you to explore these things with our students. I think it does make us better global citizens. It's not just about bird watching. It really is about, connection to me. The older I get, the more that rings true. You want to go further, I'm sure of it, right? I would encourage you to take the eBird Essentials course if you haven't already. It is an amazing course. It's about 3 hours. They just updated it, a few months ago. It's now in Spanish, if any of you are Spanish as a first language. It is a free course. It's awesome, and it's going to review a lot of the things that I said and go into depth, especially with sort of the conservation mindset and so forth. So if you have not taken that course, I strongly encourage that you do. If you're looking for more hands-on resources, I'd recommend our eBird Explorers Suite. These are full articulated kits that are sold through our kitting partner NASCO, but you can see we've got a K2, 3, 5, 6, 8, and 9, 12 version. It covers across all of these data in and increasing levels and complexity for data out as well. So if you're interested in teaching resources, those are a great recommendation. And my team and myself are always willing and able to, well, we may not always be able. We know the people to ask at the lab who are able to answer your tough questions about eBird. So I encourage you to follow us on Twitter and Facebook. We're now, thanks to Stephanie, on Instagram. Visit our website. We have a bucket at the bottom that's Citizen Science. You can click on that for a variety of resources. I mean, I've just kind of scratched the surface, to be honest, and feel free to email us. We will send a follow-up email with additional links and so forth, so that you don't have to think so hard, or when you forget next week, like, what was that Jen was talking about? We'll make sure that you have that. Unfortunately, we do not have an evaluation for you tonight, but if you have any feedback on the presentation, ways to make it better for next year or the next time I give this at an NSTA or some other presentation, I am happy to have you all as my critical friends, and please give me feedback, good and bad, about tonight if you have any recommendations. And if I can you still see my screen? Steph, if you want to unmute, you can make sure that I'm doing this okay.
Yes. Are you gonna look for the...
All right. I'm gonna show you, because somebody asked, how can I see those really, really cool line graphs? Okay, I'm gonna pick Massachusetts because I saw a bunch of people from Massachusetts, and I'm just gonna do the entire region, so the entire state of Massachusetts, although I could choose counties. Massachusetts is a big state and it's getting a lot of data, so it takes a moment. And then what we can do is see what's common. The wider the green bar, the more common the species. Wow, look at this. Common goose, or Canada goose, very common in Massachusetts. We can click on it and learn more about it. Or, come on, eBird. It's amazing. When you think about there's like a billion observations in here, how fast this comes up. Do you see this little button, line graphs? That's how I did that magic. So in Massachusetts, wow, look at that. In the summertime, Canada geese are very uncommon in Massachusetts, according to this, which surprises me. I told you that you can change the species. I can also change the location if I'm like, oh, I don't want to look at Massachusetts, I want to look at New York. I can. Let's see, we had blue jay, a bunch of people mentioned blue jay earlier. A bunch of people mentioned black-capped chickadee earlier. Black-capped chickadee, where are you? And let's try one more. Let's do the bald eagle. Now, let's see how fast. Oh my gosh, eBird, you are so good. There you go. So all of these birds year round, it's different pattern, 15%. It is definitely lower in the summer, but not zero. About 15% of checklists in the summer in Massachusetts. Look at how similar the blue jay and the black-capped chickadee are realistically. And then bald eagle, just like in New York, low every year. Totally cool. Yeah. So it's honestly super easy. Just remember to click that pretty obscure line button. Any other questions that I missed? No problem. There are only there are no silly questions, but I have been known to give silly answers. Good. I hope it helps. Steph, would you mind to share our whole webinar schedule?
Yes, I just added the completion letter link as well.
Okay. Yes. So completion letter, if anybody wants a completion letter, we've streamlined it for us and for you. You can just download that from Box. There are a link to our other webinars. Next month, I'm really excited about. It's about taking kids outside, and we're doing a panel discussion. So you'll get to hear from a few of our current teachers about the tools and tricks and resources that they use for taking kids outside. So that's going to be a very different style of webinar. But definitely look over that list and see what interests you and register today while it's on your mind. And we'll send you a reminder letter a week before and I think a day before the webinar. So we'll send you a reminder if you register for something in the future. I really, really appreciate everybody's participation and attention. I love an active chat, so kudos to all of you for helping keep this interesting and interactive. I see it's 8 o'clock. I talked just the right amount of time. If you have any other questions, Steph and I will stay online for a few extra minutes. But otherwise, enjoy your evening. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope I'll see you again at a future webinar. Oh, I'm glad it was helpful. You're very, very welcome. Don't hesitate to send feedback to email if you'd like. We can be reached at k12lab@cornell.edu.
I'll stop the recording now, right?
Sure. Thank you.